morning, and once again, a warm welcome on behalf of ETAuto, and sincere thanks and gratitude to all esteemed panelists for really taking time out from the busy schedule, some of them traveling from outside Bangalore to be with us today. Thank you very much. Yes, at the outset, as Mr. Pandit very beautifully drew the picture of where things stand in the automotive industry and the transition from what was always seen as more of a hardware game to now how softwareization is also on the rise. And talking about softwareization, if I look at decarbonization and softwareization, or SDV trend, the software-defined vehicle, these are two technology baskets. These are two baskets which are kind of driving the technology roadmap of all automotive industry players, and in the process also providing opportunities for some new entities to enter the automotive industry. So if I look at it, as Mr. Pandit was mentioning about the IT industry and how software industry is entering the automotive industry, one example comes to my mind is the CES, the famous consumer electronics show in USA. A couple of years ago, one or two automotive industry players entered the space, and now it's almost getting hijacked by the automotive industry. So that's also a kind of reflection of where things stand. So in this, of course, softwareization is also driven by some of the mega trends that we are witnessing, key among them being the connected electrification, of course, and autonomous driving, to some extent maybe shared mobility also. So since among the mega trends, electrification is on the rise and rapidly so, connected vehicle, of course. But let me start off this discussion with a question to Mr. Mahesh Babu in terms of where does the industry stand, the EV industry? And since we are talking about softwareization, and the mobility industry is also undergoing a swift evolution, how do you see this space evolving? Primarily, if I put more focus on the people carrier space, for example.
Okay, thank you, Sumantra. If I can take 2 minutes on the topics which have been covered by Vinod and this, just to set the context on auto industry, since most of them are from software. See, there is always a question that, are we at the inflection point? And the second question is, are we ready for the change? I think if you look at auto industry for last 3 decades, let's say in the 90s when the economy got opened up, there were many questions. Auto industry was in an inflection point, but in a different, what I would say, spectrum. Many of them said Indian OEMs will not survive, all OEMs from outside will come, and while 70% is coming from globally, still 30% is coming from Indian manufacturers. So did we reinvent ourselves? I think auto industry did it in the 90s. We did that very, very efficiently and very, very democratically, I would say, with stakeholders, including consumers, government, and we did it. And if you look at 90s, most of the engineers like me coming out of the college want to work in combustion of engines, and we want to do fuel efficiency, emission, and many things which happened in the 90s. Then between 2000s, in that decade, I think it shifted from the electronics started coming in. You got Common Rail, VP37, there were a lot of debates about electronification. And I think the auto industry did it very, very smoothly without affecting what I would say stakeholders. And that transition or shift happened very, very smoothly. Only thing is we are not able to recognize it well. And if I sit back now and think it happened very, very dramatically, that shift happened. And if you look at then 2010 to 2020, I would say we looked at many consumer-related developments. People looked at giving sunroofs, connectivity, and then many more things around electrification. That's where it started. I still remember when I went to the industry in electrification in 2015, I was alone. I was the Mahindra Electric CEO and no other OEM was there to make any electric vehicle. Nobody believed in it. But the fundamental, what I would say, economics makes it completely different. When we look at electrification, Ravi talked about car industry, the innovation happened around supercars. Innovation happened around fun of driving, personally owned cars. But India would have done that way. But India is doing it very rightfully in this transition where it makes economic viability to address the needs of the country, to address the needs of the people and also the industry. So it happened in three-wheelers. When I made the India's first lithium-ion three-wheeler, everybody said the driver of the three-wheeler will not understand technology. It will not work. The technology is complex, but using of it is very simple. That's how we talked about Apple phones, right? There is a huge technology behind it, but the user experience is extremely good. That's what happened in three-wheeler electrification. You are seeing large two-wheeler electrification because it's a country's needs. More than 50% of the petrol used is for two-wheelers. Country want to become, and then the transition happened. Now, coming to softwareization, I think it played a very important role. We are talking about three important factors which Ravi alluded to is asset utilization to the maximum extent, increasing efficiency and reducing the carbon footprint, giving something in a new business model to the customers, which is not owning, experience the asset rather than owning the asset. And then we are talking about lifelong connectivity to the consumers. I think all of them need digitization. When you talk about digitization, I think software plays an important role. And if I take from 90s till now, the auto industry's investment used to be effort. I would say effort and investment used to be less than 10% between 90s and 2000. Now it is about 70%. If we want to go through a business case of a new product, irrespective of anything we are talking about, I think 70% of the investment goes and efforts goes into software and development, and most of the program get delayed because of software, not because of any breaks or anything else. So that's how the influence of software has come. And I believe particularly commercial vehicle, it is very, very important because commercial vehicle is the lifeline of any consumers or buyers who are doing. It's not an asset which is parked in office or a home for a long time. Vinod talked about 25,000 kilometer running. It's bread and butter of somebody, whether it is a three-wheeler or a small commercial vehicle or a truck. We are actually improving the life of the people in the country. And the asset utilization is very, very important. And that's where I believe electrification and software put together can improve the lives of the people. That's the impact it can create.
Right. Thank you, Mahesh. Very well put. Now, after an OEM perspective, and an OEM which is striving to be a globally leading player in the electric commercial vehicle space. So we heard Mahesh's perspective. Now let's get the perspective of a global tier 1 supplier, which is investing heavily into localization in India, as well as tapping India as an engineering base for new technologies for global applications as well. So Prashanth, from what I've been observing, Continental is among those tier 1s which is really making efforts to be in tune with the times, from being a regular tier 1 supplier of components, various factors, and now kind of making certain moves, including, like, for example, spinning off your automotive powertrain business into Vitesco, and and focusing more on the software side and other kind of narrowing down your focus to have more depth in certain kind of product lines, and also tap the Indian engineering base. Could you just draw a picture very crisply in terms of what is the trend? How do you see this trend progressing? And from a tier 1's perspective, in terms of which are the new business areas, potential and opportunities that you see in the forthcoming years.
Thank you. Thank you, Sumantra. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think if you take a step back, if you look at 90s, 2000s, cars used to be purely mechanical. Then we slowly started adding electronics to that. With that, electronics came in as software. Today, the content of software in the car is nearly about 40%. And also, industry started transforming itself. 2018, 2019, if you see, it used to be case or ACES, whatever you call, automated, connected, electrified, and shared mobility. That's what the bigger trends we were talking about. But today, if you look at, all this requires a new electronic architecture. With this advent of new EE architecture, there's much more which is coming into play today. All along, car used to be a sort of a standalone in its own system, but today, car has become a third space, and it needs to get connected with the complex ecosystem, so-called an extended IoT device. So if you have to do that, the challenge which is being faced by the industry is not the technology, because most of the technologies, as I said, is coming from adjacent fields. But to try and get those technologies into a car, it's a huge challenge because safety is involved. If one example if I have to give you, all of us think this is a piece of technology. But if I have to give a comparison today, this has one display, one operating system, maybe one controller, 4 sensors, weighs 200 grams, doesn't travel anywhere. If the software is faulty, it's just an irritation for an end consumer. Whereas today's car, if you look at, it has 4 big displays, 4 operating systems, hundreds of microcontrollers, hundreds of sensors, weighs 2 tons, travels at a speed of 200 plus kilometers. If the software is faulty, it can be fatal. So that's the difference we are talking about. So that's the sort of the challenge which is being faced by companies like us. Again, the quantum of jump is so much, can we do it alone? I don't think certainly it's possible. That's why we are looking for partnerships. Be it be OEMs, be it be tier 1s, be it be tier 1. In that ecosystem, again, there's a bit of a challenge. If you see the ecosystem, that's why all along for 110 years, industry has worked with conventional tier 1s, conventional OEMs. Today, if you see lot many people, Mr. Pandit was talking about, lot many people, most of software companies, what makes Google, Waymo to get into automated car? What makes Apple to get into car? Because they see a big pie, and their philosophy is, we are good at software. If the content of software is going to give, let me also make a car. Whereas for traditional companies, the challenge is, we have a philosophy, we don't launch a car unless we achieve 0 ppm or at 0 defect. We are very good at speccing, validation, designing processes, and then only. Whereas the philosophy in software is, you launch and you fix it later over the air. But unfortunately, that doesn't work in automotive. So from my perspective, I think both has to come together. I think you have to learn from each other. That's what you see, what's happening. Now coming to software-defined vehicles. So that's the biggest piece of what you call everybody is looking at certainly. What are the 6 advantages? I just noted down. Software-defined vehicle can accomplish. One is certainly a new business model. Again, Mr. Pandit spoke about that. Today, our relationship ends at the point of sale. But today, there's a huge possibility for us to earn revenues even after the end of production and till the end of its life. Second is software separation. I think one good example is, again, iPhone. They have done a fantastic job in separating hardware and software. Today in automotive, we are not able to do yet. That's the other challenge. Everybody is working towards separating hardware and software. For example, if you see iPhone, iOS 16.2, it runs on iPhone 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All 6 are different hardwares, but one operating system. That's why the cost of development in automotive is very, very high because not able to carry forward from one platform to the other. So, but software-defined vehicles, if you are able to get the mid layer right, because always you can buy the top layer and the bottom layer from other partners, yeah? And that's how you can integrate the functions also from others. If third is certainly the shorter time to market. So SDV allows for you to have sort of a new platform of SOP with less than 1 year, or a new vehicle by itself by less than 2 years. Today it takes minimum 36 months, 3 years. And the fourth one is shorter development time, testing, and also integration. What we call as code to road. That's what Tesla is doing. Tesla, if you ask me, today he completes at 8 p.m., complete software development and validation. Next day morning, 8 o'clock, he's able to flash it across his vehicle fleet through the water. Today, do we have that capability, conventional companies? Unfortunately, not yet. We are driving towards that. Fifth is reduce test effort and time, because today the parallel testing can be done in cloud. And the last one is certainly continuously field data. When vehicle is sitting with so much of data, you keep acquiring a lot of data, and we have the algorithms built into the software system. So this also helps in, he was giving an example of iPhone, yeah, morning and evening. So that's how your system can keep learning every single day with all this data. So these are some of the 6 possibilities which software-defined vehicle makes it possible. And that's the reason you see there are a lot many players who wants to get into have a pie of peace.
Thank you, Prashanth. And I'll engage with you for 1 or 2 more questions, because I understand you have to leave earlier and have to catch a flight. So while this is happening, this whole trend, SDV trend, because India's legacy in terms of its performance or as a hub in the IT industry, so there's a lot of new opportunities. India, the kind of software engineering talent that it has, and which is also kind of reflecting in the, if I may call it, kind of mushrooming of global tech centers by OEMs. Earlier it was more by tier 1, now even by OEMs. I mean, there are 1 or 2 OEMs which have set up a tech center before even tapping the Indian market. And Continental is among the players which have kind of really set up a base here many years ago, on the early movers, if I may call that. Having said that, what is also being witnessed and is a concern for many industry leaders, perhaps for you also, is the talent availability. And you recently inaugurated your Global Tech Center here, a few thousands of engineers there. But in the kind of growing hunger or growing demand for cutting-edge technologies more on the software side, how do you see this issue of talent availability and talent grooming and identifying talent, and so that your kind of strategies kind of go as per plan?
Sure. So if you look at today, what India contributes nearly to the 40% of automotive R&D. So there's a lot of work which is being done in here. You see every tier 1, every single OEM present here in India. That's because the content of software is also increasing, as I said about. If I have to talk about today, it could be about 200 million lines of code, and the projections is by 2030, it could be 1 billion lines of code. That's the complexity we are looking at. But the question is, should India be looking at the low end by adding more number of millions of code? Honestly, no. I think we should aspire for value creation. What is that in terms of the subsystems and the systems and the center of excellence? So when you do this, certainly I think talent comes into picture. Yes, we do have a challenge, but still, given the number of colleges, I think more so we need to proactively start engaging with universities so that you prepare them even before they come into your work. I think that's one thing which still we are lacking. I think each one of us should be sort of cooperating with the universities in designing curriculum, and also so that, for example, if I have to say Conti, we have signed MOU with 4 different universities. And also what we have done is many of the institutes are autonomous, so they are free to redesign their courses. So in the 7th and 8th semester, we ensure that whatever we would like to have so that when they come to us, they are ready for us. Otherwise, earlier we used to take them nearly 6 months to bring them up to the speed from the date of joining for us to give them a work. Today, that 6 months really has gone down to less than 2 months today. But this has to continue. Certainly, I think we need to engage. That's number one. Number two is also more engagement with startup. I know India is the third biggest startup ecosystem. If you look at a number of startups, what we have, I think as an automotive companies, are we really in terms of working with startups? It's not yet. Globally, global OEMs still they are looking at East Coast and Israel and few countries in Europe. They're still not looked at India. I think that's where the next potential, certainly we should be tapping on.
Yeah, that's the next potential. And also, as you rightly touched upon, the importance of industry-academia collaboration. And that's rightly put, because there is a lot of talent on both. There's a lot of talent on the academia side, a lot of cutting-edge capabilities. And there's a lot of requirement at the industry side. And because of the bandwidth issue, perhaps they will not be able to invest enough time. So I think that it all the more a stronger case for industry-academia collaboration, which is also, by the way, we have a session in this tech summit on that.
Maybe I would like to add one more. We realized this, Continental is a conventional 151 years old company. We started making rubber products, then to tires, today migrated to technology company. So we had a lot of people, we had exposure to a lot of mechanical products, including powertrain, this thing. So when we started migrating to electronics and software, how do you retrain the skill? That was a big challenge. I think that was a very good decision we took way back in 2018, late 2018, 2019, what we called we have in-house Software Academy. That's for the global, based out of India. Because today's millennials, they don't want to upskill themselves sitting in a classroom. So we need to ensure we have to have different formats to make them more skilling, make it more attractive. So this Software Academy sitting in India has nearly about 600 plus different curriculums. So that every engineer who wants to migrate from a mechanical to a sort of a software engineer, so all this course curriculum helps them in terms of migrating. So this is one thing which we also globally did. So we migrated from software to systems academy, and now we started engineering academy also. So we cover the entire gamut of what we would like to reskill, upskill people, our own people. And it's on the go, and it's a digitalized format. So that's an additional thing we did.
Good to know about these initiatives. And last part, the journalist in me is very curious to understand. I believe your engineers are developing Continental's next-gen radar here in Bangalore, which is SOP of 24, 25. Anything else beyond that?
Oh, certainly. I think that's one. We have responsibility for few products. Over a period of last 10 years, we've gained that competency and also respect. It's not easy to get that responsibility from Germany. Germans always felt they are very good at that and they don't let it go. But today, as we speak, we are the core development center for radars. As we speak, the 6th generation radar is under development, which is due for SOP in the month of August. That goes into autonomous mobility. And also, over a period of time, we are able to gain that respect, and also now the core development for ABS single channel happens in Bangalore.
Wow.
Where the core development of the new generation ABS. As we speak, we are responsible for application engineering and also software release for the entire Asia. So the final software release for Asia, including the matured OEMs in Japan, Korea, happens from India. So as we speak, yes, we continue to develop ourselves and see how do we get more and more. Recently, we started Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity. So slowly we are adding new Center of Excellences so that we should be able to drive those subjects from India for the globe.
And I also see this as an example of demonstration or endorsement of Indian engineering talent. Yeah?
One of the innovation, just if you take 30 seconds, from autonomous mobility, 2 years back, the first vehicle to go was Jaguar Land Rover. It's purely software, no additional cost. So in an autonomous car, level 2, you will have radars, camera, sensors. So guys came with, when you are doing a 4x4, drivers can't see the floor. So the image which captures it relays that image on the screen with a few seconds delay so that the driver sitting inside the car when he's doing a 4x4 or even driving in a very narrow lanes in the city, we tend to look at this so that you don't hit the curb. So this gets displayed on the screen. So no extra cost, it's an additional software, this thing. So this is one example of innovation.
That's the beauty of software. And as the softwareization trend increases, I'm sure there'll be more examples. On that note, Prashanth, thank you very much for sparing your time. With this whole new age industry, there is a new breed of suppliers, so to speak, and these are suppliers or providers of technology partners. And Suhas, if I may ask you first, with this whole SDV trend, what level of engagement are you witnessing now as compared to, let's say, what ETAS was doing a few years ago? And how do you see this evolving?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, if you look at ETAS by itself, right, our traditional products were mostly based on hardware measurement. Yeah? I don't know how many people know about ETAS and what we are associated with, but if you talk to any calibration engineer, yeah, so they generally knew one software called as INCA, yeah, which was very prominent for emission measurement and things like that. And the other thing were the blue boxes. Yeah, so these were very prominent. So there were times when people have called us, we want ETAS from INCA. Yeah, and so this is typically how our business was. And this was predominantly 95% of our business, along with, of course, our hill systems as well. Yeah, but in the past 2 to 3 years, yeah, by itself, yeah, we've also transitioned as the complete software-defined horizontal player within the entire ecosystem, for that matter, where we are combining topics like the middleware that we spoke about in that sense, which is going to enable the hardware-software abstraction. And there are elements with respect to the software virtualization and the virtual testing. So these are certain elements that have come in. And of course, on the IT side, we are also seeing things like the cybersecurity, which is of course both off-board and on-board on one side. And then finally, the cloud services, which includes your OTA, the data, and things like that. So when you look at this entire ecosystem, right, what we call as the software-defined vehicle by itself, yeah, so it encompasses everything from the vehicle to the off-board, yeah, or the cloud in that sense. So from that perspective, we as an organization also had to, one is change our business models, change our mindset, change our way of approaching the customers, and change our customer contacts by itself. Yeah, and it's again, I think people have stressed quite a bit already in terms of the way the industry itself is moving, where we are seeing that we are not the only people who are able to make this happen. Yeah, so ETAS will not be the only player in the software-defined ecosystem. Yeah, so here it's all about partnerships. It's not just about I have just one friend and this friend is my partner, but we have this new term called as the frenemies, yeah, where we are probably also engaging with our competitors. We are probably working in certain adjacent topics.
Are you already, have you already embarked on such a strategy?
Of course, yeah, and this is the only way for us to, in fact, operate in the software-defined ecosystem for that matter. Yeah, and when you look at it, and this is also one way, it is probably driven by the OEMs as well, yeah, where they are also not trying to get locked in by a single supplier, yeah, or a single ecosystem in that sense. They are also rather looking at them being flexible, yeah, with respect to choosing what they want as one step, and they also want to choose the state of the art in terms of the technology, yeah. So what this typically means is that not everybody has, yeah, the latest and the greatest product, yeah, in the software-defined system. Yeah, each player has their own area of strength, and each player will bring their own resources also, yeah, into the ecosystem. And it is, as a player, we will also have to identify what are these areas of strength, and if there are areas where we just do not want to operate and it is not even profitable enough. Yeah, so this is where we also kind of partner with certain other players, or even, and it's like, again, a software-defined vehicle is also not just about products and not just about software. It's also about software integration. Yeah? And when we talk about integration as well, this is an area where there is still a lot of scope for partnerships. And I think this is what Mr. Pandit was also mentioning in terms of the partnerships. Yeah, and where they are also partnering with certain players, the industry players and all these, yeah. And this is how the whole ecosystem is also going to evolve.
Right.
And we also are operating in the same way. Yeah,
That's right.
Thank you.
Brahma, like, I mean, this whole softwareization trend is, as he was also mentioning, system integration is very key. And that's where the middleware technology, I mean, this term is increasingly prevalent now in discussions for the mobility, or for the this whole, when there's any discussion around the SDV. So how do you see the opportunities for, for a player like you in terms of these new kind of requirements that are there in the industry, and which are the key focus areas you think would you kind of train your sight on?
Yeah. Like Mahesh was saying, India is not just sitting with mechanical vehicles. There's a lot of software, a lot of features that are brought in which are very relevant to India. That's definitely possible because what we look at Vector is basically making it simpler for the engineers who are working on these complex technologies, right? So how do we do it and how do we achieve it is basically to bring a structure. Right? There are standards defined, of course. There is AutoSAR, there is Adaptive AutoSAR coming in now for the OTA as well. SDV, there's a lot of discussion going on. Each OEM is working in a different way. And having heard enough about what is SDV and what does it bring in as advantage, it is important to really see in all this how to make it simpler for the engineer to focus on their objective. Right? So that's what we have been working on since last 35 years at Vector. Right from the invention of CAN, bringing in the ability to understand what's going on the bus.
Sorry to interrupt, but even in this electrification trend, this whole discussion about 2,000 parts in an ICE vehicle, 20 parts in an electric vehicle, it's kind of oversimplifying the whole story.
Right, but the parts
in many aspects, actually, the EVs can be more complex in terms of technology, and which is why simplification is all the more important.
Simplification of this, the complexity that lies in the science, in the chemistry, in the algorithms that are getting in, is so huge. And then, we have to remember there's not enough processing power out there. There are not endless resources to be, writing software and then thinking about what to do it. So embedded systems in automotive has been very protective, very conservative. We never worried about cybersecurity, right? So it was so much. Each OEM knew exactly how to manage it and control it, but even if connectivity was there. But then how do we work on this software complexity? It's not new for the IT world. They have been talking about middleware. It's like, I think they're hearing that from 20 years.
In automotive context, it's a relatively new term.
It's a new term, but then why is it so important in automotive to define this middleware very clearly for OEMs? Is today OEMs are getting boxes from tier ones, literally. The control system sitting inside the ECU, function of course is defined, the system behavior is defined by OEM or put as a requirement, but then the deep implementation is left to tier ones. Right. And each tier one has specialization and they are bringing that with all their competencies. But then if you have to break it up and then say, hey, where can I look at reuse? What Prashanth was talking about. How do I bring this reuse? How do I make it more secure, in terms of cyber security? So this is very important to simplify and bring an architecture which is able to communicate on the lowest layers in the automobile today, which are highly protected with CAN, signals running, which are very defined by OEM. Nobody understands, nobody knows, not two tier ones working with an OEM knows It's proprietary to OEM. And then on the outside layer to interact with the IT world, right? So the required competency to understand the automotive behavior and then still step up with newer technologies there. CAN was there, it is still there, it's going to be there. But then that's not enough for the kind of data that we are talking about. There is Ethernet coming in automotive. So how do we bring these multiple systems and make them interact is what every OEM is looking at and calling that as operating system.
Right.
So that's vehicle OS. That's to define this interfaces for the IT world, which is, of course, we can call them apps, be it Android or Linux apps or such apps coming in, and allowing software development to be done, what also Prashanth mentioned about that new feature without touching any hardware brought into the car should be possible not just by the engineers in this industry, but any very smart app developer.
Correct.
Enable that is what the middleware is focusing on to make it, of course, bringing best competencies together because there are multiple players. There are players like us who understand internals of vehicle operating systems, communication bus systems very well, and we have been working with several OEMs, several tier ones, and we understand that. But then bringing the IT world, Androids of the world, Apple, CarPlays and so on, running applications and giving those interfaces seamlessly to the vehicle data is very important.
Seamlessly is the key word.
Yeah.
Interesting developments there. Mahesh, with softwareization and also the whole EV trend, EVs perhaps lend itself better as a platform to not only generate, of course, everyone generates data, but in terms of analyzing or crunching big data. From your experience at Switch Mobility, how are you kind of leveraging this software-enabled big data processing to your advantage and creating more value, maybe?
Yeah. So I think my colleagues have talked about while EVs have reduced number of mechanical moving parts, I think number of electrons moving is much higher than the moving parts in the EV. So, and hence it is very, very complex. So just I'll tell you one simple example. I think most of the time when we talk about EV, we talk about fancy cars. I'll just give an example of, we run about 300 electric buses, which is a public transport. Nobody would like it in this room. But the reality is how complex it is and how difficult it is more than even a car. Because we just go to the Yelahanka depot, we have a diesel depot and we have a digital depot of EVs running in. We take about every vehicle about 2 terabytes of data every day from the vehicle. And we have a command center, we do a product digital twinning, we do a route digital twinning, we do a city digital twinning, we do a driver digital twinning, and we did about 10 to 12% of efficiency improvement just by software tuning of it in the last few years, last 1 year. It's very complex, and it's what I would say is very addictive, and it's self-learning where you go and sit and understand how the driver drives, how the routes are. Some of the routes are more stop, some of the routes are more long distance, and each of them needs a tuning of software which can make efficiency better. So we do a lot of things around it, and you will have a driver onboarding. Just imagine 300 buses into 600 drivers every day coming, onboarding, schedule, and our schedules are 100%, 98%. We are one among the few who runs 100% schedule on all the routes which are running. It's a very, very complex ecosystem. And every predictive stop is defined, timing is defined, everything from driver onboarding to the route planning to digital twinning, to everything is done through a software digital depot. And my colleagues have explained how difficult it is because customer will not, what I would say, understand all this. And they will experience a simple public transportation system. There is a huge software behind it which is running it seamlessly. Otherwise, you can't do it repeatedly every single day for next 12 years. We are going to run it for next 12 years. So it has to be robust and reliable. And I would say that we are doing plenty of things. I would say the learning came from the Transport for London, 100 vehicles we are running. And similarly, there are multiple challenges happening in public transport. We are the first one to launch an electric double-decker. Everybody said it's not possible in India, London is fine. And then we launched it, and it's running in Mumbai. If you are in
To see the
Mumbai,
number growing in Mumbai.
yeah. So if you are going,
Are
if
you
you are in
entering other
Mumbai,
cities
just
also?
go and experience it.
Which is the next city, if you may reveal?
Already we have supplied to Hyderabad. So Hyderabad is going to run double deckers. As we speak, we are discussing with Karnataka to bring about 10 double deckers here. The cabinet is meeting, I think, today on trying to approve it. So we are trying to bring this because public transport is the one which India needs to adopt. We are heading towards a peak of 1.7 to 1.8 billion people. We have urbanization challenge, and if we keep buying and even sharing cars, it's not going to end. We need to get into public transport. We have to make public transport more reliable, robust, convenient, and electrification and softwareization is going to make that happen over a period of years.
I think the case is stronger in a city like Bengaluru than in many other cities, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you. On that note, thank you very much for sharing your insights, your perspectives, and a lot of knowledge on this whole theme of softwareization of the automobile. Yes, when it comes to a very interesting and very pertinent topic, time is usually short, and so is the case in this session. But really, thanks a lot for what you shared and for your patient listening, audience. Thank you very much.